So I brought this up at a recent podcast with Jacob Winans. I think it's in the full episode, which is a section which only landed on Patreon. So maybe not everyone caught it. And I think it's a very interesting point worth kind of discussing that kind of inspired me to think about some things. At some point in the past couple months, we had a video party on Discord, and Jacob Durat was there, who does Sterile Garden, Basement Tapes, and he's been involved in noise since, I don't know, at least the mid 2000s, kind of the same time that I started out, maybe earlier, I'm not quite sure. But he said something that was, kind of in the opposite pole of what often gets brought up. Is he said, noise nowadays is so good, and like the stuff I'm getting, buying, trading, hearing from labels and peers is so much more creative and interesting than the stuff that I was hearing and getting in the mid 2000s when I was really active at that time. And that was such an interesting take, because it's so often that people say the opposite, and that people only want to kind of glorify and praise times before, either when they were first starting out and getting into things, or even a time before their involvement or awareness of noise. So whether or not that's objectively true is hard to say, but I think it's a right attitude to have, and to and I would agree with him in many ways. I think the recent output of people in general, but I think thanks to a certain handful of labels that have been very prolific in putting forward new, interesting work in large amounts, I don't think it's a time that's just rehashing what has happened before. When I actually listened to something I talked about with Jacob, is when I listened to some of this collection, this large collection that I imported here to Germany, that was like what I collected from 2007 probably until 2015 when I moved to Germany. It all stayed in the basement. A lot of it's from what I oftentimes think of as the most exciting era to me when I was getting into noise, is like the Tronics era, when kind of the Rita was really, really establishing himself as a really important force in noise, and putting forward a lot of philosophy about what noise is, what harsh noise is, how we break those things down. But I do notice that when I listen to some of this stuff now, back that I collected back then, I kind of feel like it's a lot of the same palette, a lot of the same sound palette, sound color, that I kind of know what I'm going to get into with a lot of this stuff. That probably has a lot to do with what I was focusing on and collecting. Of course, there's always a ton of stuff going on, and my view and my scope is limited, and particularly back then it was, and it still is. I'm fully aware of that I'm not a musicologist or anything like that. And I see the people who like to take little shots at me here and there about my ignorance about this or that era of music, or my blind spots, and whatever. I'm aware of that. But the point is that when I have this old collection compared with the things I've amassed since then, since moving to Germany, and kind of like mostly things I've amassed during my distro time of the past 5 or 6 years, I feel much more attached to the music that has come out in the recent years. And I feel like a lot of this stuff is variations on a theme. So the point of this is that I want to make an episode here, kind of a solo episode, that is highlighting maybe staff picks, recent arrivals of the distro that I have been listening to, that I find remarkable, interesting, worth at least knowing about and talking about. That's often talked about, is that the lack of maybe centralized discussion, lack of reviews, lack of feedback when you put things out. And I've tried to do review episodes in the past, and I don't really feel a strong, desire or even understanding about what the purpose of a noise review is or should be, or why we need it. And I know people have different approaches to that. So people write reviews in their own in their own language and their own from their own angles, and I think that's great. And I like reading them, but I don't feel a strong need to critically try to explain or justify or criticize anything here. I just want to focus on things that I think I like, and tell you why, and kind of just move. I'll move through them pretty quick so we don't get bogged down. Noise is obviously a very prolific genre. There's so much to sort through, and sometimes you just need someone to say, "Hey, this is good," and that kind of puts you in the right direction. I think reading the now listening, now playing, whatever kind of threads on the message boards that exist or on the Facebook groups, that's the most valuable thing I think for me, and the thing I enjoy the most is just seeing what people are talking about, seeing what people are listening to. It's not even about people who have some sort of clout endorsing something. Oftentimes you just notice certain people, certain posters on certain boards that you appreciate their taste or how they describe things, and I'll know to at least check out something that so and so their avatar has written, because I just know that they have a certain taste that I at least respect and like to hear what they think, and I like to listen to what they like. Even if it's not something I end up liking, but I like to have that kind of network of dialogue and relationship to these different people. And so this is just kind of a shot at that. This is just recent arrival staff picks, I guess. I don't know what I'll call this episode, but it'll segue probably into a kind of continuation of a episode I did a few months ago when I was starting up the distro, which I called a label spill, I guess. I try to name these things based on what series or what kind of approach they fall into, but it all becomes kind of fluid and arbitrary. But I will probably segue this into kind of some more behind the scenes information and chat about how setting up the distro went and how it's going now. A couple months after, I'll show kind of some changes I made to the shop floor and the workspace here. So if you're on Patreon, you stay tuned for that. But otherwise, this will be our weekly episode about recent arrivals and things I've been listening to. I have a couple really good episodes in the can, and I'll be getting back to interview episodes next week, starting with Toepfer, who I released. He was here a couple weeks ago now, and I released an episode of him playing a set live in the space last week on Patreon. It's still up, of course, and I'll release the interview we did next week, so stay tuned for that. And then there's more in the works, of course, as always. So first thing I want to highlight is the new album by Kiran Aurora called Virgin Forest. Came out on Adhuman. Kiran is an artist that I've always really, really liked since I became aware of his work 5-6 years ago. His albums that I really was drawn to were like the one on Prosnag, the one on Tor and Lute. I'm not remembering the names, but they're, it was a very, very alien, buggy, weird take on harsh noise. He's been fairly quiet for the past few years, and this new album came out I think a couple months ago. It's much more subdued. I think it was described as computer music. It seems to be mostly digital. It's very tense, kind of asymmetrical. It has sort of a feeling. The bugginess is still there. These insect sounds, but this is more like kind of like a starry night. Maybe just the title is informing the way I listen to it, but it does feel like a very clear but very surreal walk through a dark forest on a very clear starry night. It's hard to follow. You should listen to it loud. It doesn't ever get to crazy speaker blowing levels, so I would recommend cranking it up, because a lot of things are happening on a low level, sub bass things happening on a low level, and I always feel like after I listen to it, I need to listen to it again, because you start out quite immersed in it, and then you just kind of, I don't want to say you lose track or zone out, but every time it ends, you kind of wonder, like, what did I just listen to? What was that? It's, kind of like waking up from a dream and then trying to remember what it was. And the more you try to think about it, the further it slips away. So putting it on again is kind of always what happens. And I had the same experience over and over. So it's something that really begs a lot of repeat listens. Oh, by the way, pretty much everything I'm going to talk about today here is in stock right now. Probably at least when you're listening to this. And so you can pick it up primarily for Europeans, but if you find this, if you want to find this at a distro in the US, a lot of it's from US labels, because that's kind of where I focus the distros stuff. So this is available at White Centipede Noise, or hopefully from the labels or a distro in the United States, wherever else you're at. Oh, another thing, Patreon supporters of the podcast get an automatic 5% off on everything from the distro. So like a continuous 5% off. So if you're a Patreon supporter, you have a code you can use with all your orders and just take a little bit off the top, which hopefully sweetens and evens it out a little bit, and takes the edge off it, so to speak. So this next tape is from Bent Window, a label called Bent Window from Canada. Tape is called from an artist called Oracle Chamber, Light from Another Sun. This was a project I was not at all familiar with. I like Bent Window, and I was picking some stuff up from him, and he has a very diverse catalog, a lot of metal, some things that I don't necessarily focus on stocking. So he recommended this one. Then he said, if you're focusing on noise, I'd recommend this one. So I grabbed a couple copies, having no idea what it was. And, a lot of times things arrive here when I get a lot of stuff at once. Sometimes I don't get to listen to things before they move out, and some things don't really catch my, they don't really catch my eye or my attention. And this was a kind of a random one that I picked up, to listen to, partially because of the recommendation from Nick, because he did point it out, like that it's good and that I should stock it. And also the artwork kind of, stuck out to me, not because I really like it, but because I think it's kind of odd and, not really fitting for a typical noise release. It's not, it's good. But it looks like something that would be on like kind of like an earth metal type album, not the type of noise I like typically. So that also kind of drew me towards it, to say, okay, what is this? Is this just to kind of give it the test? Is this good, or is this kind of, are my instincts that this is maybe not good, going to be right? And I was wrong. I think it's really, really good. It's really interesting. It reminds me of, it has kind of that heavy magnetic, reel-to-reel tape sound of Menem, maybe a little bit less kind of obscure and foggy, but still has its own, kind of esoteric, astral atmosphere to it. It's good, heavy, well-produced, reel-to-reel tape noise. It's a full album. It's got, quite a lot going on. The tracks do have a kind of melodic bass to them in the way they use kind of the droning bass tones of whatever machinery they're using. And I like it. Just as a kind of a total surprise, I was pleasantly surprised by this. And someone also recently asked for a recommendation who's kind of coming from a more metal background. I recommended this right away. So someone who's kind of more into metal or structured industrial, I would recommend this to them. And I think it's it's definitely a project I'll keep an eye out for more. And now, it's another case of can't judge a book by cover. And now that I do know the music and I do know what it's like, I appreciate the artwork more. I think it's, not everyone has to follow the same look and style. Next thing to talk about is, just like the recent arrivals from Tribe Tapes. Nothing really specific, and I don't need to spend a lot of time talking about Tribe Tapes. They are kind of getting their, I feel, just due. They're getting their due respect. People know about them. They're really prolific, but it's always fun great stuff from them. The CDs they've been transitioning to have been looking really good, doing jewel cases with really nice touches of just different colored spines and things like that. The Confounder tape CD looks great. The way he used the transparency, and again, a kind of a mix of obscure reissues and new stuff. So Anal Sadist, a project I did not know anything about, and I still don't really know what they're all about. The liner notes I referred to a number of kind of interesting obscure releases they did in the 90s, and this material is really kind of grinding industrial noise. Reminds a bit of David Gilden. The K2 and Dead Body Love collab reissue is great. I mean, for the heavy crunchy stuff. Illusion of Safety tape CD reissue. Just great stuff. Always good stuff from Tribe Tapes, and I think one of the best labels going right now, who's doing a lot of important stuff. Let's see, next tape. I don't know how to pronounce this name. I think I've mentioned it in a previous episode, but it's a Finnish project. Tyhjä Pää, maybe. It's called High Magnetic Intensity. There have been a number of releases, self-released. There's one on a CD on Satatawata called Prolonged Troubles in Concentration Memory that came out a couple years ago that I remember stalking and hearing a lot of positive feedback about. And I listened to it, and I appreciated it for its craft, but I didn't love it. Just, I don't know, it was really hyper detailed, kind of cut up sharp stuff, which isn't always my cup of tea. This one is more kind of grounded and chunky and primitive, but still just really good. Just really good use of sounds, simple things to create kind of a drive and narrative, a nice shimmery kind of sheen over the sticky texture. It's one that I just keep kind of flipping back to back. Again, one that it ends and I'm like, what was that? What was going on there? There's a lot going on, and it kind of just moves by, and it makes you want to listen to it again, which isn't always the case with noise. So this is on a label called Sudden Movements. Fairly new label, I think, from Finland, fairly obscure. The guy came by. He made an appointment to come by the shop. He came by and just said, "Hey, you want to trade?" And he brought some tapes, and I did a small trade with him. And that's I don't know that they have much internet presence or whatever else, but another cool micro underground label that's putting out good noise right now. So that one again. Yeah, I'll spell out the name just because there's no way I'm gonna know how to pronounce it. Tyhja with the double umlauts. Next word P double A, both with the double umlauts. Next one is from a project called Stud, called Boundary Waters, Minnesota, and this is a nice. It's from a label from Minnesota, my home state, from Moorhead, kind of up north. And I've been kind of wanting to check it out for a while because I'm aware that he's kind of using, it's kind of like the approach to junk metal noise with a lot of wood. So the formula is fairly simple, but it does make a really kind of satisfying and unique a sound, a take on simple harsh noise. He has some I think loon, kind of Boundary Waters, northern Minnesota type wilderness sounds layered in there and looped. I'm assuming maybe has taken some inspiration or at least some awareness of Jostad, who has been using this kind of atmosphere and sound palette for Source for some years now, and these themes, but it definitely sounds different. It seems almost like a pedal worship type approach, or like a junk metal worship type approach, kind of like a modern harsh noise approach that fetishizes the sound sources or the themes, maybe like a post Rita approach to rural and natural sounds in noise. So cool tape, and cool label. Glad I finally got to stock some from this nice young label from my home state, Minnesota. Next one I really like is a new 3-inch CDR from KM Toepfer called Clinical Trials, live 2005, live being in quotation marks. And he dropped some of these off when he was here doing the podcast a couple weeks ago. And, I've talked about it before. He's one of my favorite contemporary noise artists. Just the way he works with kind of extreme, non-conventional sound, I would say, in the realm of harsh noise. Sounds that are usually maybe more at home in the sound art, or methods that are maybe more at home in the quote unquote sound art world, but with the kind of brutal intent, at least to me, of harsh noise that I appreciate. This just kind of overwhelming, all in texture and violence focused use of sounds. So this one is basically, it's like the live, he played here with a setup, and this is basically a studio recording using that setup and those patches that he's been working with in his software. So it sounds very similar to what he played in the shop, if you've seen that or heard that, but it's a more precise and studio version of that. So if you like that, if you want to have that kind of thing at home to listen to, it's sine waves primarily as the source. So it's very much piercing tone oriented, exploiting the stereo field and psychoacoustic, kind of the beats that occur, the drilling, the beats that occur when you have sine waves that are slightly detuned from each other, happening simultaneously. So it's minimal, it's very extreme, but I love it, and highly recommend it for people who have liked his previous work. Another one here is a tape on Buried in Slag and Debris by Yonas Torstensson. Buried in Slag and Debris. I always say degree, and I've had to edit so many ads that I've done, or I think when I was doing the interview with him, and I record my intro, and I think I have everything done, and I'm listening to it back, and I'm like, fuck, I said degree multiple times. So you have to record it again, or try to drop in, record that piece and drop that back in. So anyway, Buried in Slag and Debris, very good label from Canada, ran by Chris Gibson. Also does Untitled Zine. I think probably pretty well known by most by now. And he puts out a lot of different types of music, a lot of which I'm not familiar with. And this was another one that I just was like, well, I should at least listen to all the Buried in Slag and Debris tapes before they move out, and see what they're all about, because it's always a new thing. And this was a surprise, just because I assumed it was going to be some sort of noise, kind of structured studio type noise thing, but it's basically just an audio diary, as far as I could tell, and it took me a while to realize that. But it's an audio diary of this artist who's a young person, Yonas. It's a very intimate and vulnerable document without being, it's very matter of fact and non-sentimental, but it's just this young person talking about their studies, their music, their kind of hopes and plans, their thoughts about their music, their thoughts about the tape. So they're talking about, I hope Chris Gibson likes this. Let's see what he thinks. Their thoughts about their own voice, they're blind, thoughts about, just very minor, fleeting mentions about what they're doing and their thoughts about it, intercut with, crude pause button recordings of them playing piano, banjo, and singing. And, it was very touching. It's not something I would have sought out, but just putting it on, expecting one thing and kind of just being, my daily routine of being around the shop here, packing orders, listening to noise, doing this and that, or, at least like listening to music. It just kind of like stopped me in my tracks a little bit and changed the tone of my day. And it was touching. I don't know. So I really liked this tape, and I can recommend it. I'm also now curious about what their other work is like, if it all kind of follows the same format of audio diary, or if it's more varied. But very nice tape. Another thing I think worth highlighting is the new releases from this label, Begin Hostilities. They dropped a big batch, and I got all of them. I think it was like 10 releases all at once, and a lot of, really good, hard-hitting, harsh noise artists, often splits with the label's, the label boss's project, I think, which is Silver Molt. There's a Vincent Dallas tape called Sound Celebration. There's an a split with Exegesis. There's a split with JHK, Jackson Kovalchuk, Jackson K, JHK there. A developer tape, who's always really good. A short developer tape, great cut up noise if you're into that sort of thing. Always a treat to hear new developer. And there's like 5 other ones. And yeah, kind of meat and potatoes, but really good. And I also offer them, and I'm going to do this now more and more with new distro stock. I also offer them as a batch on the site, so you can. So I created a little bundle option, so you can get like all, I think 10 of the releases for a discounted price if you want to check the whole batch out. Next thing is something that is not in stock, but you might be able to find his work on other labels or from him directly. It's this private tape by Awenydd, wearing a t-shirt also by Awenydd. You may have caught on by now, but this is a very kind of low-key, semi-anonymous, well, I wouldn't say anonymous, but just very like non-ego driven project based in the Netherlands, currently an American based in the Netherlands, who's been putting out a lot of self-released tapes, very prolific in the past year or two, often sending them out as gifts, doing a lot of trading, kind of really in the spirit of tape trading. Nice, careful, minimal artwork, thoughtful, handwritten, J cards, and noise that just kind of harkens back to kind of experimental industrial noise, I guess. Experimental in the sense like within someone's own means. It's not necessarily like reinventing the wheel, but just someone who is, rather than referencing genres or subgenres, is just using their equipment to express themselves with noise in some sort of way. A lot of, this tape is a lot of really kind of pretty noisy ambient, very deep soundscapes. He has a good understanding of just creating musical noisy sound, good sounds that work together, heavy, good production, some whispered kind of vocals in there that really remind me of Taint, even though I don't think he's coming from the same place at all. Percussive strikes, and every tape that I hear from him is a little bit different. And he's done things on he's published things on labels, and it seems to be continuously active. But I would recommend checking this out if you aren't, and maybe reaching out to him if you have a way. I think he does like to communicate with people. I don't think he's like anonymous but I won't say his name here because I think he likes to just keep that in the back burner. But I can, if you reach out to me, I can try to pass on his contact information. Or I think he's probably on Instagram as well. So I mean, he's not hard to reach, but it's really just kind of like a symbolic project. I think that just is there to explore sound and whatever he's putting. I mean, they're lyrics and vocals on it. So I can't speak at all for what he's putting into this of himself, but it's a rich, it's always a rich sound experience and like a nice little transmission. Another release that I don't have in stock, but I have a personal copy that was a nice thing that I really was kind of surprised by and got into was this Bloated Data. I got a package from Divine Severance. So other good releases from Divine Severance, a cool Australian label who is releasing a lot of Australian noise. There's a tape from Puddle that was cool. Tape from what's it called? Sharp's Formation, also good. These are, Australian names. I think, I see the names of the people behind them, and I'm like, oh, I kind of know this person. I've, maybe they've ordered from me, or people that I've associated with, been knowing about in Australia for a while, and just kind of seeing their noise projects emerge, oftentimes through Divine Severance. And this product, Bloated Data, I think is the guy who runs the label's project. And it's really good, straightforward, harsh noise with a lot of really well produced, crafted physical metal sounds. So like just great bashing layers of different types of metal, different types of acoustic noise, physical noise, but with a kind of three-dimensional production and depth that is quite impressive, stands out, approaching kind of the production, the metal junk production qualities of some of the greats, like Mania and a lot of the Finnish artists who use metal percussion and metal abuse, so to speak, to really rich sonic extent. So this is a good CDR. The Bloated Data is the Aesthetics of Death. I think it came out on Minimal Impact, which I believe is another Australian label. Small labels, it's a big country with not a lot of people, I guess. And I think it's, there's stuff going on over there. And I think it needs to be spread out. And, hopefully we can keep that flowing across these other continents. I think that's kind of all the releases I wanted to highlight. Again, these are things that I just have been liking and that maybe aren't as visible or well known as some of the other things that come through. And I think it's always good to just shine a light on things that you like and make sure you talk about them at least once, because things go fast and sometimes things kind of disappear and get buried under the deluge of other stuff, and it's worth chatting about them. And hopefully if you're listening to this and you like things, you go on Special Interests or Scream and Writhe or the White Same Discord, or make, I don't know, YouTube video or podcast or wherever, or just on Instagram, just post about what you like. Just spread it around. People want to know. People want to know what others are listening to. I think it's important to know we're all kind of this hive mind, and good stuff rises to the top. But I think you also have to be conscious about making sure it rises to the top. So coming up to the distro, I have some stuff from Hospital soon, the Death Pile reissue CD, the Star and Kadef split, which I'm excited about. A new tape, I think, from Carousel, which is a very cool project out of Portland, who I've mentioned before, along with the tape from Time Theft, our boy Joel. New stuff from Robert Fuchs coming in soon. Hopefully a big package from Phage. They've released a bunch of new stuff. They're always, releasing new stuff, and I'm hoping to get a big package of the new stuff and restocks of some of the old stuff, because it's always good to have that in stock. And more. There's more coming in all the time. And if you want to, let me know about certain things that you want to see if you're in Europe or wherever, or if you're, US label, do write me, do let me know, like, hey, I want to get access to these. Oh, another thing. One thing I think I forgot to mention, which, they don't need huge publicity because they're the fucking Incapacitants, but there's a cool new Incapacitants CD, which is the live recording. It's called, I don't know, Chwalfa. It's a word I don't know. It's a live recording of the two-night concert they did at Cafe Otto or OTO in London last year, 2 years ago, whatever it was. So it's a great live recording. Can't go wrong with live Incapacitants or pseudo Incapacitants for that matter. But that one Souvenir or whatever that came out on Alchemy a couple years ago. That was a weird one. I know some people are like, the digital toy Incapacitant stuff can be hit or miss for people. I think it's still pretty great, but this is just ripping live Incapacitants. So recommended for sure. And I feel like it kind of has also. So I'm mentioning it because I feel like it's gone a little bit under the radar because the label doesn't really like promote really actively in the noise scenes, I think. So it seems like a lot of people didn't know what happened. There are liner notes in it that interesting liner notes, but I felt they were a little bit, I don't know. I read them a few weeks ago now, but it's like it was like focus on how like I used to like noise, but then I realized that it's all full of like fascist wannabes, and it's like a big boys club, and it's a bunch of bullshit, but Incapacitants are like the one good group that still like make me realize noise is fun or something like that. And I get feeling that way, but you're missing a lot and you're missing the point. And these liner notes like kept drilling that point home, like beginning, middle, and end. They brought that up again when talking about how they had kind of fallen out of love with noise, but like got back into it because of this Incapacitant show, and it was so great. I don't know. That was just, on the one hand, man, right-wing stuff is going crazy these days. I know people don't have as much tolerance for middle ground or ambiguous politics or posturing or imagery. That's fine if that's how you feel, but the liner notes were corny here, but good CD and highly recommended as well. So I will segue now into the label spill, where I'll ramble even more about what's going on behind the scenes here at the shop, at the label, White Centipede Noise, etc., etc. Anything else to mention before I sign off is just that, whitecentipedenoise.com. You can grab all this stuff. Patreon.com/whitecentipedenoise if you want to support this podcast and get a lot more from it. There's a lot of, full episodes of the podcast on Patreon. Bonus episodes that are, Patreon exclusive entirely, of performances, interviews, documentations. There's a lot more on the Patreon. Really the only front end is what gets out to the public. And, I know people have thoughts about paywalling, and if you're from the outside looking in, I understand, you might understand it, but it's necessary to make this all possible. Everything needs to kind of continue on with, this doesn't happen without financial support. And again, you get a 5% discount, indefinitely off the distro and the secondhand stuff that I'm importing to the shop all the time. So all this collection, the secondhand collection, is being slowly uploaded to the website. And that is also included in the distro, pricing. It all kind of flows together. So, so check it out, and we'll see you on the Patreon side now.